Yeah. Have we started or
No, not yet, mate.
No, that's fine.
I can tell you, he's getting into it. He's loving it.
I know. I feel like
We'll go from here. We'll go from here. So, Jake, welcome to the Insight podcast. How are you doing, mate?
Thanks for having me, mate. I'm really well. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, you had a long journey up here, didn't you?
Yeah. It was just sort of like 4.5 hours.
just sort of.
Just to see you, mate.
Still got up at like 5 a.m. You know, just as you do on a casual. What day are we on? Wednesday.
It is Wednesday.
On a casual Wednesday.
Yeah. So
I'm going to kickstart with asking you a question. What 5 pieces of kit would you take to a wedding if you only had 5 pieces of kit? And that's everything.
Okay. So can I only choose one camera then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I made that up.
So a camera. I'd probably stick with what I know. So an FX3 if we're getting
I'm not going to go into
specific.
detail. Like I'm not going to say, oh, you've got to take a camera and an SD card.
That would be 2.
Yeah.
And then,
that's it. Gone.
Yeah.
So
a
camera counts with the SD cards.
A
and the
camera.
batteries.
Yeah. So obviously a camera being the center. I'd probably go with the FX3. It's what I know. Second, obviously a lens so the camera can work.
Yeah.
If it's going to be one lens, I've always been, as cliche as it is, the sort of could shoot an entire wedding on a 50mm if I could choose any. But a good friend actually, Nick, he has just got the Sigma 28 to 45mm
zoom.
f1.8
zoom. It.
And I've not typically used a zoom. I use zooms for my commercial gigs.
Dark side stuff.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing. But I guess if I'm just using one lens, a 28 to 45 would obviously be essentially sort of 3 lenses in one. Especially with the active stabilization, you could crop into 1.1 times crop on the sensor.
Yeah, true. That's true.
So I think that could work. So that's 2. 3, audio, I guess. It'd have to be a TX 650 or 660.
Yeah,
I think
he's gone minimal. He's gone speed.
I would go there just because I feel like they'd be more versatile with microphones.
Yeah,
I do use.
You can lob them around.
Yeah. Hide them in bushes. So that's 3. 4. I guess support gear, a tripod. I mean, I was thinking about maybe a monopod, but I guess that could be more versatile in a tight ceremony situation, but I think generally speaking, outside if it's a bit windy, a tripod's going to be a safer bet.
Yeah. In a 5-item scenario, tripod, push legs together, monopod.
There you go. I mean,
up here for thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, this is. I'll probably ditch my monopod now.
I've taught you something.
Yeah. So that's 4, and the 5th. Okay, so I was going to say drone, but I'd probably say my lunchbox, to be fair, mate. I've got this Yeti cool box.
He's gone for it.
And I don't think I could shoot a wedding without having a wrap. Before. Like
just
a chicken Caesar wrap or a falafel wrap from M&S. I can't walk past those fridges without buying one of those. So yeah, I'd probably go for a lunchbox. Then 6, if we had to, would be a drone just to get some lovely shots. But,
What drone do you use?
At the minute, the Mini 3 Pro.
Nice. Yeah.
I know they just came out with the Air 3S.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, seen that.
Which is
I've seen appealing. It, but I've not seen any specs on it. So is it supposed to be better?
I mean, I think it's the 1-inch. It's got the 70mm lens and it's got the 1-inch sensor. It's got a LiDAR on the front. So
nice.
I guess if you're flying in low light conditions, the sensors obviously don't work in low light, so it's pretty good for that. But yeah, I did have the Mavic 2 Pro before, and I actually downgraded to the Mini, if you like, but in my eyes it was
we did the same thing, didn't we? Yeah, so
we did. And I was a bit concerned that I don't know, I had this I think there's this misconception that I know I have a slightly bigger rig on the day than I used to, but more kit and bigger kit is the best. But I feel like the longer I've been doing it, and things like tripods and support gear, actually a more compact form is just so much easier on the wedding day and it's less of a barrier to entry to get a shot.
100%.
And I think that is what I've really enjoyed about the Mini drone. It's just I can have it in one bag. Yeah. And it's so much quicker to set up and turn on. Yeah. I think there's just not...
It's less of an ISO, it's quieter. Yeah, it is just generally... Like you said, though, I did the same thing and I was worried about going to the Mini because I thought, it's seen as more unprofessional, isn't it? You know, it's more of a consumer grade. Like anyone can have that Mini and anyone can buy it, anyone can fly it. It's not seen as professional.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It perfectly is for weddings.
Exactly.
You need the sort of I guess response time of being able to just get it out of the bag, get it up in the air, get that shot of her coming down the aisle or whatever you need, and then bish bash bosh. Well, just before we go too much into kit and everything, I just want to roll it back.
Yep.
We're going to rewind.
Yep.
Going to take a step into Jake's life before weddings. So I want you just to talk me through just roughly life before weddings, how you got into weddings, what you were doing before weddings. I know we've got some similarities in terms of kind of our sort of path into weddings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll let you take it away, buddy.
Right, so yeah, I guess going back to kind of education is where it started for me in terms of life before weddings. So straight from school, I went to uni to study science. So I did biomedical science at university, and I was always kind of going down the science route, but I had the creative thing on the side. So it was mainly in art, but I got into photography quite early on. So during uni is when I kind of really started to pick up like a DSLR camera and used to document like photos and like travel films when we went on holidays. Used to travel quite a bit as well, which is actually where I met my wife, to like Southeast Asia, and I would just like to mess around with the camera essentially on the side. It was never really something that I thought would be anything like
what it is today.
A career, especially not today, but even like working for money, it was only just like a passion thing. I never really thought about it from a money point of view, and a job. It was mainly kind of watching other YouTubers. So this was back in 2011, 12, and so kind of like travel vlogging was on the rise, and I think because you obviously have a similar background in YouTube.
That's right, yeah.
And so the likes of sort of Ben Brown with the visual vibes, and there was like Marcus Butler,
Fun for Louis, we mentioned before,
Casper Lee. There was a lot of
this is some like, if people know, they know, like these are classic throwbacks. It's crazy that they're now throwbacks. Like to me, that were like my like not childhood, but like my like teenage to like early adult years, like watching and consuming content by these people. So it's interesting that like, because you're just a few years older than me, so I guess like we've sort of like, you could argue that they've maybe definitely influenced us into doing like the path that we're on. But yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and so that was my first kind of like real glimpse into the videos that weren't obviously like music videos. So they were a bit more artistic and creative in like the travel side of things, and that's where I really got into the filmmaking. But that was just a passion. After uni, studying biomed, I was going to be a dentist, so I got into dentistry to do a postgrad course, but I did like a gap year between where I did more traveling, more stuff with the camera, and had a change of heart and basically just didn't want to go back into education. I still stayed within science at this point, so I worked for like a medical diagnostic company for best part of 6 years.
I find that crazy that like those two lives exist. I think I've said this to you before, but like for me, like a creative and sort of I guess like, I don't know, an academic intellectual are two like, this is me being really like stereotyping, this is my life experience. I'm very much in the first category of just being a creative, bit of a dimwit, but like that's what I'm all right at, that's something I can do. But like being like academically smart, I guess, like being good at academia, writing, sciences, anything like that, I'm always like, I was very much at school like very much the kid that was just always walking around with the camera, and to me, I find like that very fascinating about yourself, that like you kind of are very talented at both, clearly, so
I
mean, just
I'm
just
saying
great guy, great guy, just
I guess
too talented.
It's two things that don't really go hand in hand to a lot of people, but I don't know, for me it's just something that I've always had. I've always like
I'm born this way, baby.
I can juggle. But yeah, like it's something that I've always done, and so it was something that I ran in parallel for quite a long time. So I we'll get into obviously the starting and wedding side of things, but like I said, I worked in the like science space, medical diagnostics, for best part of 6 years, and that's where I worked up until 2019, and first wedding I shot I think was 2017, and so I kind of, that allowed me to cross over, but I was quite happy doing them both side by side for a few years. Before I got into weddings, off the back of the travel film stuff, which I used to post YouTube videos, they're all private now, so you can't see them. I mean,
on the trainer you were private to them,
private but not deleted.
So
if you really want to see them, I might be able to send you an unlisted link. But
I need to see these.
Not.
I need to see these.
Yeah. So I dived into like a little bit in front of the camera. So I was into fitness as well back then.
Yeah.
And so I used to think, okay, right, just taking the passion a little bit further, let's combine the travel stuff with fitness stuff. And that's something that I used to shoot for like gyms in the local area, and it was kind of like word of mouth, and it was my first sort of commercial client.
What with this type of content? With this like promo?
It was kind of like promo stuff, like brand films for gyms. It was like a few CrossFit gyms, so it was like an event, like a CrossFit event, and it would just be like social media content or website content back then.
And what year is this then? Is this after
2013, 14?
It,
So I was still kind of like towards the end of uni, still at uni. Before my like travel gap year.
Nice.
So yeah, my first few commercial clients, and that kind of just happened for sort of 3 years until my first wedding. So it was just word of mouth. I did some stuff for like friends' companies. I had a friend's company set up a fashion brand, so it was like a shoe company. So I did a lot of sort of photo and video stuff for his company as his company was growing, and then made connections and did things like estate agencies, worked for some hotels, and it was just word of mouth, and it just organically grew to the point where someone asked me to do a wedding in 2017, and that's kind of where the wedding side kicked off. It's never something I'd considered before. To be honest, I think I was page boy when I was 4. I'd never even been to a wedding, so I really didn't know what to expect, let alone if I'd enjoy filming one.
I think that's often the case though, isn't it, as well? Like, especially with a lot of suppliers in the industry, it is a very unusual job. Like, it's very rare that I think someone will grow up and say, I want to be a wedding photographer. People might say they want to be, a director when they're a kid or a photographer, but I guess like weddings in specifically, it's like it's a niche category. Like, it's really, I think you have to just stumble into it. Like you've just said, like someone has to approach you and just say, can you shoot this? And then people say, I'll give it a go.
Exactly.
And then it unlocks like this,
yes man. Exactly. I think I was a yes man because I could be, because I loved it and it was a passion, so I just wanted to say yes to
That's
everything.
It. In the early days, it's just like experimenting, isn't it? You just like trying,
exactly.
Like you said, your gym stuff, you've been traveling. And then obviously someone asked you to do a wedding, you're like, why not? Let's go for it. That's literally like almost similar to my beginning. In the early days, going back to the YouTube chat, I would then go in on YouTube and looking at like wedding film school, and Craig Adams I were looking at back then.
Me too.
That's like another, probably like where a lot of our like education at that point
for sure
came from.
That's an interesting one though, because I think obviously wedding film school, Craig Adams, there was Scott McKenna as well, can you remember? But it was interesting,
Matt Johnson and all the rest
obviously
of it,
who's still an absolute goat.
Goat.
But it's an interesting one with the sort of like YouTube education space and how it's evolved, I think anyway, because back when I was starting weddings, it was mainly from American YouTubers and American filmmakers. And so my whole sort of like business and the way that I approached the wedding was based off of how they did things in America, which, as we know.
So it's interesting that you brought this up, because this is a question I wanted to ask you. Like, I want to ask you like how you started your business and what challenges you faced at first. Like, for me, that's like really interesting, because I would say when you try, I'll let you do the talking on this, but basically I think I know where you're going to go. And you're saying that like you sort of base your business off of like an American model that doesn't apply to British couples, but I'll let you pick that up.
It's essentially that, mate. So I guess even down to the structure of the day, but also just the I guess the end product that an American filmmaker, at least back then, would produce. I think it's very different. And I mean, the obvious one being the logistics of the day. So the structure of a later in the day ceremony, they'd stay until the end of the night, which seems crazy for, at least starting out as a UK wedding videographer, because that would be kind of like sometimes 6 hours before, like after the first dance. But it's all condensed back in America. And I think even down to speeches, personal vows, first looks before ceremonies, there's a lot of elements that don't translate directly to the UK. And so in theory, theory, and it's even like standing as the bride walks down the aisle. I remember my first wedding, I was all set up thinking, yes, let's do this. I got an amazing side pan shot with a gimbal, and it was in a church, and obviously everyone stood up, and I was like, oh, yeah,
buggered that one.
Maybe weddings aren't for me. So yeah, and it's just all these little
just
things.
Starts backing up the kit at the back of the church, going home, setting up hot cameras, backing tripods down.
I tried.
Sorry, I'm going. And
yeah, exactly. And I think that was something that obviously I took, and all of my learnings were obviously great, but I took with a pinch of salt. And then you just have to adapt into the UK scene. But obviously nowadays there's a lot of things like podcasts and UK educators in the space that can like better guide you into to the setup of a wedding day. And there's loads of like behind the scenes of a wedding day, which I think is personally the best way to kind of learn
100%,
how to attack a wedding.
That, and obviously we chatted just before we started, like before we sat down here, we were chatting about like seconding and how much you can learn from seconding. I think you've always got to remain sort of in a a positive and like humble mindset when you second. Like it's important not to get too big for your boots. And I think it's great to second. Like I did everything backwards. Like I didn't start seconding until like last year. So that's something I wish I did earlier.
I agree. And seconding is something that I wish I did earlier. And that's probably my biggest piece of advice to anybody new starting out, is just to get into seconding. I think I did 5 years before I even second shot for anybody else. And so and I used to solo shoot as well. And that was before I had a second for me. And so I feel like I would have accelerated my business from a technical standpoint, but also just like being like immersed with like fellow videographer mates, basically. Which I've made tenfold in the last sort of 3 years that I've been networking and seconding.
This is it,
he knows her, and we can then just have mutual friends.
But one thing I did want to say, just going back to the sort of, I guess I'm going to call it like American isms. Like a lot of those, like you mentioned, like first look, personal vows, that kind of thing. A lot of that. So when we sort of, my first year was 2017. So back then, there was none of that. At least to someone that's beginning, especially in the beginning of when you're starting out, you're probably, maybe not these days, but back then definitely, you were not shooting like a first look or personal vows or a lot of the Americanisms, even like stopping to the end of the night. Like I've started stopping to the end of the night occasionally if it's popping off and it's great to capture. That would, if you'd have told me that back in 2017, I'd be like, that's mental. Like that is like I'm not. That's never going to be a thing. But I think a lot of those, Americanisms have sort of come over and are now applied to how we shoot now. But I guess when you're first starting out and you're watching these films and you're thinking, how am I going to apply this to what I'm sort of shooting? Like a sort of like a mega budget, high budget wedding in America versus like a barn wedding in the UK with a couple that's very reserved and shy and awkward because they're English. Like that's never going to look the same. Exactly. And you're trying to apply that even in terms of like, I remember like looking for music and like I was trying to use the music style of like what the Americans were doing, and that just doesn't work like over here. It just doesn't, like when you've got a more like a classic scenic look, like a countryside church barn, having like the sort of high romancy folk American music in the background just makes it look like this is a bit like jarring. You know what I mean?
And that's an interesting point. But weirdly, in the last sort of like 2 years, I would not be able to tell you why. I have probably 30-40% of my clients are now American.
That's interesting.
So I'm actually flipping back, and I feel like it might be the same with you. Kind of flipping back to the early days and weddings like that, ironically. But like you said, and I think maybe it's because I'm posting more of the stuff like first looks, personal vows, and it's obviously showing through in my films a little bit more. And so even my UK couples are kind of picking up on that and asking me, do you think it would be a good idea to do a first look or letters in the morning and record this for the sake of the film?
Yeah, which is great. Like, it's great to have all that into it.
And I think ultimately we're creating a film for that couple, and we want to do the best job we possibly can. And so if they feel like they can elevate their film through doing more personal touches, I think why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
But that leads me on nicely to asking you about sort of your style then. So where do you think you're sort of sitting now with your style? I know this is a really awkward question to answer because like if someone asked me, I'd be like, oh, I don't have a clue.
Without using any of the
talk
trigger
about
words.
Yeah. So it's hard to like talk about it. But like, yeah, I guess I'll let you sort of speak free on it and see where you go with it. Because styles are a really interesting topic, I think, because I think you like for me, I'm always sort of constantly sort of in and out and changing. So, yeah, I guess where do you feel like you sit at the minute? What would you describe it as?
Yeah, good question. So I guess I can kind of categorize that on like my split as to how I
split personality disorder.
Approach a wedding. Yeah, I guess like some days if you get married on this day, it depends which way I wake out of bed.
Is it the back of the church again? He's shutting the cameras off.
Yeah,
he's doing it again.
So yeah, I guess I kind of approached the wedding day, kind of like an 80 to 20% split with kind of 80% documenting moments and kind of just letting things unfold. Yeah. And then 20%, let's call it prompts. So just prompting things like moving over to a window light, turning off a light, asking, I don't know, the speaker during the speeches, do you mind if you just stand towards the edge of this table because the light's better, we've got a nicer angle and it would just elevate your film. And also maybe they'd have their back to guests if it wasn't, a conventional layout of a room. It's things like this I would give prompts on. And that's something I never used to do, at least as much. So I was always kind of, and I guess this was kind of a thing in the industry going back 4 years. It was fly on the wall, document moments. And for some reason, I feel that was more professional and a better way of doing things. But the more I've gone through the industry, or rather gone through more weddings, I've felt that I can better serve my couples 100%. If I just give like 20% of prompts on the day. And I feel like they can relax a little bit more because ultimately most couples just want a little bit of a prompt and direction on the day as well.
Of course they do, yeah.
I feel like if you're just being in the corner of the room,
not saying a word,
and they're otherwise missing out on a really beautiful shot of them by a window light, who's not going to want that for their film? I mean, they're employing you obviously to capture their day, but they want to look the best they possibly can. And I always compare this, someone asked me the other day, I guess hair and makeup would turn up to bridal prep and they'd set up and say, okay, we're going to use this ring light or in front of this window, and they dictate.
That's a really good point.
The celebrant in the ceremony will say, okay, the reader stands here, or in a church, the vicar. The venue coordinator will talk to you about which doors to enter from, and so everyone else is doing it. And I feel like that then had a little bit more confidence in what I was doing, that I was trying to do my job to the best of my ability, and I'm serving my couple. And so I feel like there was comfort in that. I know that it's only an internal thing, that I don't need to be fly on the wall all the time.
I think if you hit the nail on the head, I think, again, this could be controversial, but I do feel like when people are starting out and they come into the industry, the first thing they want to, the thing that people are drawn to is comfort. Because they're in this new industry, they're going to be drawn to comfort straight away. So I think people are drawn to this fly on the wall, minimal, etc., etc. We've heard it. We've been through that before. But I think people are drawn to that because it's easier. And I think that's an easier thing to do, especially when you've not got the confidence and, let's face it, the knowledge yet to be sort of guiding people. If you're brand new, then you're not going to want to be saying, oh, can you just stand over it? Because you don't really know. And I think in the early days, it's easy just to sort of sit back, kind of absorb it, let the photographer sort of take over and watch what they do. And then I think as you get more experienced, you might you go one or two ways. You could think, yeah, I'm happy doing this, and I'm happy just sitting back and letting it unfold and just capturing it. But some of us think, actually, I want to squeeze a little bit more out of this moment, and I want to capture it this way. And I think it is, I would say, a confidence and knowledge thing in the early days, and then I think people make a decision of what they want to do. But
and I think going back to the confidence thing, there's nothing wrong obviously when you start out, just learn and hone your craft.
Absolutely, because you don't know,
and then you can then incrementally introduce something that you might do, even if it's just turning lights off, if there's an orange light in bridal prep or green prep. Things like this can really make a difference.
It's the little details in it that you start to pick up on, and that really, because people look at people's films that are just, especially like the newbies, they look at certain people's films, they might look at your films and be like, how does he get that? What's he doing to get that shot? But yeah, it's just the little tiny little details. Which brings me nicely onto I've segmented it. It's gone for it.
It's Harrison special, mate.
Yeah. But yeah, so talk us through your gear and like what you use to shoot weddings, and you can talk about anything and everything in between, how it's changed, what you're using now. Because did you say have you updated something? Have you changed something?
Yeah, just a GoPro chest mount. Yeah, just running around.
Yeah, just iPhone.
Sometimes one on the back as well.
Yeah.
360
camera, walking around all day like that.
It has changed, and I think it will probably, by the time this goes out, I'll change it again. But I mean, largely, I'm at a place where I'm quite happy with what I'm shooting on and with. So essentially, just to run through from cameras down, I, as I briefly mentioned earlier, run an FX3 and I have an A7S3.
Oh, cheeky. I've got one there.
Yeah. What? F3?
Oh, no.
FX3. Have you had a coffee this morning, Harrison? You good?
He's lost it. He's hearing things.
So yeah, an FX3, which is a Sony camera.
Thank you very much.
And an A7S3, which, to be honest, I had as my A camera and the FX3 as my B camera, just because I was using the EVF quite a bit. But I've since now swapped because I run a monitor, which I'll get onto in a second. So FX3 is my A cam. And my third camera is a recent pickup, it was earlier this season, which is the new Sony ZV-E1, which I think I've briefly talked to you about a few weeks ago, which I'm obsessed with. And
you did,
shout out to Nick Ricks again, because he recommended this camera to me.
I've still got that screenshot saved on my
of the model.
Yeah. Because I think it looks amazing. It sounds great, looks great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm sure people know, but to run you down, it's essentially a full frame camera. It's the same as an FX3. It's half the price. There are two negatives in that it is one SD card slot, and it can be prone to overheat, but only if you're running, 50, 100 frames a second for 30 minutes in Tuscany. But I did buy a little kind of like, I think it's like 30 quid on Amazon, a little like cooling fan that I just clamp on the back. It's quite nice if you put your face up to it in the ceremony as well. It cools it down a little
honestly,
bit.
I think for like a C camera,
and that's why.
It. That's all that you need. Exactly. That's all you use it for.
And so that's why, because I mean, picture profile wise,
and then I think, does it have a crop as well? Is that the other issue?
No, it does not. It's full frame, but it has a dynamic stabilization. So I think in my standard, in my FX3 and my A7S3, there's like a standard and then an active stabilization. The ZV has those, but one step further, which is dynamic stabilization. So it does crop in 1.3 times, I think.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
I mean, active is 1.1, so it's not too much more, to be honest. Yeah. And it's like I always compare it to like the GoPro hyperlapse feature, where it's like a gimbal. And so it's pretty scary how good it is. Obviously, it does crop in a little bit, but
Well, I had a little play with it in Yoka, and it was like, really I was like, whoa, that's what made me take the screenshot.
Exactly. And so that's kind of a camera that sits on my hip most of the day. And it's my third camera when I'm solo shooting, which most of the time I'm shooting with seconds now anyway. But it's just such a good hit camera. It's kind of my reaction for VIPs on front row in the ceremony, guests, same for speeches. And it's just such a good camera to whip out if you want to get like you haven't got time to set the gimbal up, but you want a quick shot of the ceremony, or, the candles have just been lit and you want to get a quick wide. It's really great. But obviously it's one SD card slot, so I don't use that for
primary A-roll. Yeah.
Exactly. So camera's done. Lenses.
Tick.
Oh no, that was a long segment. Did I tell you I have a ZV?
You just told us one more time, and I didn't quite capture that.
So yeah, really impressed with that. And then lenses, sort of the standard sort of arrangement here. So run a 35, 50, 85, and a 135. I tend to stick with Sigma. I do have a 24 as well, but I'm using the 35 more so. Can't tell you why. I swap whichever I prefer. It depends how tight the dance floor is.
I think that when you're staring at it a lot like we do, I think eventually you get to the point where you're just like, I'm a bit fed up with this, I want to mix it up. And then you get obsessive over like 35. Like for me at the minute, I'm getting into that 35 territory. I'm a 24 guy, but then I'm stepping into 35.
Yeah, I've only just moved to the 35. Was a 24 for like a season and a half.
We're loving it. Couldn't get enough of the 24.
But Yeah, so that's my lenses. I tend to be Sigma. The Sigma art lenses is what I personally love and use. I use like a Tiffin 1/8 Promus filter and variable ND on the front as well. But yeah, I have those on each lens as well, so there's no sort of like moving it across. It's quite as streamlined as I can make it, given how many lenses I sort of bring. I do have a 24-70 as well that sometimes sits on that ZV I was talking about. Just gives me the ability to like punch in for sort of VIP guest shots during the ceremony.
I suppose that'd be good for like you said before, like details as well. You could get some nice details with that on that camera, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good,
and I think it just comes down to just having things readily available, so you can do the best in the shortest amount of time possible to get
if
the
things
shots.
go wrong. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So that's kind of like the camera lenses. Audio wise, it's probably quite similar to most people in the industry. So I was just TX650s for the longest time. I still have them and I still use them quite a bit. But I also have Tascams, which I absolutely love. So I think I have 3 or 4 Tascams. I've got the Pro ones, the 32-bit float, and to be honest, I haven't really noticed the difference between. I had just the Tascam DR10Ls before, and the Pros do sound pretty similar. It's just when the bride or groom is slightly further away from that Pro, because of the 32-bit float, I can really push it through things like Adobe Podcast to get more of a kickback, cleaner audio. Use the Tascams and have a white one as well, and different colors to kind of blend in with suits and stuff, because I hate seeing audio stuff on show. And even the 650s, I can't remember who told me about this, but a little sleeve that sort of pops into the jacket pocket so that it's not on show, because I mean everyone hates the look of the vape looking audio recorder that's in the groom's pocket.
Weird things,
the jacket pocket. But and I have an F3 and this is something I'm using more and more so, especially this summer. I feel like every single wedding I've gone to, there's been like a sound guy, which has been great. It's just like a plug in, leave, which is amazing. That's the audio.
I've noticed though that still with the sound guys, it's the same for me. It's great when you see that, but at the same time, I always want to be double micing up. So I'd probably normally pop a mic on the mic, and then I normally mic up whoever's reading or speaking, just because I've noticed if you rely on the sound tech sometimes, and I've had it where the quality of the audio is actually worse than if I'd just mic'd up with, like, I use the Tascams, so it's if I'd just mic'd up with the Tascam, that would have probably been alright, and I would have like sort of got rid of any sort of other stress from that, you know, having to like go over a mic up and then mic up and mic up. It feels like a big job and a big stress, when really you just need to just mic up and just kind of can just chill out. But backup's very important, I think, for audio.
I mean, the amount of times I've gone to flick on or flick off a TX650 off the mic and realise I've just turned it on.
It's good. But you think, always, got backups, it's fine.
Backups. Exactly.
So I think what I'd like to chat to you about is how important sort of connections and partnerships are within the industry. Obviously, we've briefly touched on it about, you know, through seconding, I guess you start to make more connections and you see how people shoot and you get to know sort of who hangs around with who, I guess. Like, so how important has that been for you, would you say, over like the last few years?
Massive, to be honest. I would say it's probably like the biggest player in the kind of success, if you want to call it success of my business. I think there are many factors as to why that has turned out the way it has. But yeah, I think it's a huge player. I think, obviously, like I said, I started shooting weddings in 2017. I went full-time at the end of 2019, which is obviously a great time to go full-time right into the midst of COVID. But
same as me. That's literally what we...
It's a small blip, isn't it? But I guess I survived that. But obviously with the sort of rise of styled shoots, and obviously little weddings that were going on, I just pivoted everything and just really... I guess because I came out of full-time work as well, I had all this kind of like, I was so used to working the 9 to 5, and so my work ethic was like up here. And I couldn't just sit still. And so I just reached out to anybody and everybody within the wedding industry, but also like my commercial work as well kind of took off around then. and would reach out to venues. So I used to go to a different venue every weekend or weekday, obviously outside of the actual lockdown, but yeah, disclaimer.
It's fine, Boris.
But yeah,
would
shoot venue tours of like to revamp their website of a few like really nice Cotswold venues, and kind of like, I guess, snaked my way into the venues, to be honest, and just built rapport with the venue coordinators, the owners, planners as well that might plan like a styled shoot, photographers as well. And so I just said yes to everything. And a lot of it was for free. And I think that really helped just build my connections. Obviously, I'm based in sort of Oxfordshire, Cotswolds way between the two. So it's a really great location, especially kind of like it's a nice market of weddings
100%.
And so yeah, I just built this network, and it's, I think, just being a good person and just letting your work do its talking. But more importantly, just being a good person and being friends with people, it goes a long way. And I think from that, it's just kind of snowballed. And you just work with planner who knows another planner, you become suppliers at venues. So yeah, I think it's been a huge player.
Yeah, because I guess the more you progress in the industry, your work starts to slow down through word of mouth, I would say. So in the early days for me, I was getting a lot of my work through word of mouth when I first started out, as most people do. It's sort of like a friend of a friend or a cousin or whatever it may be. Someone's seen you on Facebook, because it was Facebook back in the day, not Instagram. But yeah, then it were Instagram. But then I guess the more you level up and you're in the industry and the business, you sort of shift into sort of planners recommending you. So I guess how has that changed for you? Is that landscape looking any different in terms of like, does most of your referrals and the planners refer you more now, or is it still like photographers, or like, I guess, where's the work coming from?
Mixed bag.
From those connections.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Mixed bag, to be honest with you, mate. But there is definitely still quite a lot of referrals from planners. So yeah, I'm fortunate enough to have quite a few planner friends that refer quite a few nice weddings to me. But Instagram is another big player. I think it always has been.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody that doesn't have that as a big player, I think just step up your Instagram game, because there's a lot to be said about Instagram. And yeah, so it used to be like kind of Google traffic, and on my website inquiry form, it was Google. To be honest, I've never been like an SEO whiz, so I don't know what I was doing. Maybe Google loved me. I don't know.
Google loved you.
I think that's subsided a little bit. I've moved like a website domain, which is probably a bad thing to do. But yeah, kind of that word of mouth thing, for me at least, is still really, really big.
Is it?
Yeah.
In terms of like couples or?
Yeah, so I honestly would say like 4 or 5 weddings a year would be kind of like a bridesmaid or bride's sister or a family member here. And it's always been kind of like a thing and a cluster of inquiries that just keep coming through each year, which has been really lovely. And obviously I'm sure you've done it as well, to shoot someone's wedding if you've already shot another wedding of someone in the family or in the bridal party. It's just such a nice thing. It's a nice, like, it makes you feel good, because obviously they know what you're like on a wedding day as well, and they like it, and obviously your work they like as well. But yeah, I just feel like it's quite nice because you know the people, familiar faces. So hope that answered your question, mate. So it's kind of like a mixed bag.
Mixed bag, yeah. I think that's, I mean, it's I just threw it on you there. It was just a question I just thought of. But yeah, like I said, I think it is nice. Like this year I shot a bride's wedding who last year I shot her sister's wedding. And now, so there's 2 sisters and there's a brother. So on the day I made a joke, like, I only need to do the brother now, and I've kind of sort of done all the family, so that might be nice to round it off. So come on, mate, speed things up. But no, yeah, it is a nice feeling. But I think, for me, most of mine are probably coming from Instagram. I would say I'm gonna say a solid 80% are probably coming from Instagram, and I would say 10 from videographers.
That's actually one thing I didn't mention. There's a lot of referrals as well, which I have to obviously pay tribute to. But your Instagram's killing it though. I've been really enjoying the content.
Taking the mic now. He's trying to sweet talk
mate,
me.
I'm not. I think there's a lot. I was asking you questions about what you think of a trailer, if you think I should condense it down and whatnot. Yeah, you've been smashing it, mate.
Oh, cheers, mate. Well, I think the same for you. That's why I've got you on the pod, mate. It's more about you, less about me. Come on, let's get straight to the facts.
I want to hear about you, mate.
I wanted to ask you, what are some of your favourite aspects about being a wedding filmmaker?
Aside from the obvious benefits from being a self-employed person, which I love, it's like the flexibility.
Yeah.
Is obviously the biggest player here, and not working for somebody else. It's amazing. I don't think I could ever go back. So aside from that, obviously, I know it's cliche, but it is such a special job. And I think it's something that's often overlooked. And people say, yeah, it's amazing, it's the best job, it's their special day. But I think like if you actually think about it, it is really crazy. I got married a few years back, and I think I knew it was important before then, but that changed my whole perception.
It does, yeah.
On my job. Yeah. And obviously how important I hold my role on the day, but also even like moments that I choose to include on the day. So
yeah, that's massive.
There might be a beautiful shot with amazing light, and it's like a detailed shot of a table setup. But because I've already used one shot of Nan earlier on in the drinks reception, I feel like I can't use her again in this particular. And that's just purely a creative response.
I guess it's the conflict, isn't it? I guess that's an interesting topic. I guess that'd be nice to talk about, because I sort of feel the same. Recently got married this year myself, and I think since I got married, I've approached weddings totally different, like completely different. Because you're viewing things more of like from what you remember from the day and what were important to you on the day, and you think, hang on a minute, just because this shot might look like creatively and from a filmmaking wedding videographer's perspective, you think that's a really nice shot, I want to put that in. To the couple, you're actually not that bothered about that. Like you want to see that it's become so apparent and so important to me to really capture people like and faces and reactions and include as much as that as possible. Yeah. Because it's less about, although it is about the details because they've spent money on that and they want that captured, it's more about the people. It's getting those interactions, those people, not to the mic, getting those people, hugging and laughing and the tears and the claps, and I think all of that is really crucial.
Absolutely. And I think going back, just one example off the top of my head is how I've changed my solo ceremony setup. I used to run 3 cameras, still run 3 cameras. Sometimes there's a fourth, but let's just keep it for 3. That's just if I've got more space and I want like a safety wide. But those 3 cameras, I used to have kind of like 2 at the front, say. This is an ideal situation with space and lighting, of course. 2 at the front on a 45 angle towards the couple, and then maybe 1 at the back. And I'd run those, and that would be the setup, because I thought that was the best way to do things. But now I would maybe still have the 2 at the front, or maybe I'd have 1 at the back and 1 at the front. But to me, that camera on my hip for VIPs on that front row of your guests, to me is so much more important than a pretty shot from the back of the ceremony. And I would favour that shot, because I feel like, yes, it's nice for the ceremony full edit and the cut, but sometimes I can get to the back and I can hold a 3-second shot, which is like my establishing general view shot of the back of the ceremony, which I can use in the film anyway. But for the most part, those shots are just for your ceremony multicam. And so I'm just thinking of what my couple are going to appreciate more. And those VIP shots on the front row are just, in my opinion, way more important than probably most of the stuff you're shooting the day 100%. In the ceremony. That is the real emotion.
Because that is the wedding.
That's what people are hiring you for.
The ceremony is the wedding. So that's what.
So and I think that for my own wedding, shout out to Alan Wing who filmed our wedding, but just seeing my family members, I would rather just see a film about them than me, to be honest. Like, it was just amazing to see them enjoy the day, laughter, tears. And so, I think going back to your question, that really changed my perception on what we do. I've only been doing it since 2017, and there was actually a bride the other day that posted an Instagram on her 6-year anniversary, and it was a little clip that I filmed, and it's so special. It feels like so long ago, which it was, and it's still so special to her and to them. And that's only 6 years. Like, in 20, 30, 40 years time,
crazy,
it's just like a crazy concept that I don't think I can quite get my head around. And I know that technology will advance and the landscape will probably be very different, but I feel like it's never going to be any less important. If anything, the importance is just going to go up and up and up. And so, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, for definite. So what are some of your I guess.
The cons.
The cons. Yeah, the negative for
absolutely
the industry.
none.
Absolutely none. I love my job. It's brilliant. Move on, Harrison. Next question.
No, I think as with anything, there are cons. And I think that, again, is quite subjective. The obvious one being the seasonal aspect of our jobs. Yeah. I'm sure it's no surprise to you. It's not very sociable in the summer. My friends think I hate them from the months of May to September. Some of them I do. But,
some of them I'm quite thankful for it, to be honest. Yeah.
And family members included. It's difficult. And that's something I'm working on. And like I said, I do a little bit of commercial stuff as well, and I'm trying to not do quite as many weddings, but hoping to have like a few weekends off on a more consistent basis. We've just had a little boy. I say that he's literally 1 in 2 weeks, I think, which that's just flown by. But I think also that's really kind of like I need to
get a
be
life
around
balance
a little bit
there.
more with a balance.
And
I think that is obviously a negative and something that can be improved. And I'm a bit of a yes man, to be fair. I always say yes to jobs.
I think it's a self-employed life as well.
I think it is, and
like,
it's
that
it's
so
scary
hard to say
thing.
no, and like you kind of feel like you've always got to be busy because you are working for yourself. So you're like, I can't have too much time off, and that is a big con.
Obviously, the flexibility is still there when you need it to be. But
it's
hard. I feel like
I'm
ironically working more hours now than I did when I was working 40 hours a week. But it's something that I think that would be my only negative. And I think that it's quite a big one. Yeah. But it's completely subjective, isn't it? And I love working as well, of course, but it's just finding that balance.
Finding the balance, it's super important. I think it's hard every year. So every year I try to sort of, I guess, like slow down or like taper back, I guess, the amount of bookings I'm taking on to try and find that right balance because
it's different for
as
everyone
much as you love
well.
the job. Yeah, as much as you love it. Like some people love doing like 50 weddings a year. That would never be me. Like just after COVID, I got close to that and I'm like, I hate this. Like it's just, I love the job, don't get me wrong, I love shooting, but like doing close to 50 weddings a year, that's near enough every weekend. It's intense. It's really intense. I don't think people realise, and especially when because you think to viewers that are maybe listeners that are listening in that think, oh, it's just 1 day a week. It very much is not. Like I've said this before, it's very much the opposite of that. It's more like, I would say it's a 6 day a week job. 1 day off if you're lucky, sort of like to rest after a wedding or whatever. But it's quite an intense
it's definitely
job.
A misconception, isn't it? Friends saying, oh, you only work 25
days
a year.
I wish. I wish. Come along and shoot, see how you feel. Try and keep up, sunshine. But so I guess what I just want to move on to sort of, if someone fresh, brand new to the industry, not done a wedding before, what would you say to them? What advice would you give them about anything to do with the industry? Over to you.
Good question.
Thank you very much.
So I guess we've already touched on the second shooting aspect, but I would say that is the best place to start, to be honest. Just reaching out to people that are already doing what you want to do. Obviously, maybe they're local to the area, and so then if you're offering to maybe come and shoot or just to shadow them for the day for free, it's easy to do and it's accessible. I think that's the most important thing. And just to get experience, I think there's no better thing than just to get started.
It's about just being a sponge, isn't it?
Going back to me starting, it's annoyingly something I didn't do, but I wish I did. And in hindsight, obviously, it's a beautiful thing, hindsight. But I think that's the main thing. In terms of actually shooting the weddings, obviously, the key here is to obviously hone in on your craft and just learn things gradually. I think at first it can be quite overwhelming, and I know even now I feel a bit overwhelmed with certain things or changing too many things on one wedding day. It's too much because you'll forget something, or you won't. You'll forget your camera at home or something stupid like this if you have too much on your plate. So I think when it comes to shooting the wedding, strip your process back. Do what you know. Do what you're comfortable with.
This is what I was saying at the beginning. Yeah,
exactly.
It's about
Don't
the comfort.
Overcomplicate things. And I think I read a book.
Don't jump the gun.
Exactly that. This book was called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Have you read this?
I have not read it, but
it's a great book. You should read it. And he goes through the 1% rule, which is essentially kind of what I've only recently read the book.
I've heard of this. I've not read the book, but I've heard of what
this is. It's essentially just become 1% better in what you do each day. So it might be like, wake up 5 minutes earlier, spend 5 minutes longer working out, going for a run, something like this. And I think if you apply that to the wedding world, and it's something that I've always done, obviously I didn't know that this was a thing that people kind of like used as a sort of like a task manager. But every wedding, or even like each week that I woke up, I would write lists of things that I wanted to implement, and then just pick one thing and then just do it. And at each wedding day, I'd speak with the photographer, I'd message another videographer on Instagram, and just try and learn one thing. And if you say you had 30 weddings a year, if you then learn 30 new things, you're going into the next season with pretty much you've leveled up 30 times.
100%.
And I think then when you look back, it just all accumulates, and that's basically the approach. And it's something that I would highly recommend anybody, any supplier to do. It's just constant, and if you love it, obviously, if it's just a job and you just want to get your head down and get your paycheck, food on the table and go to bed, fine. But I mean, at least if you're anything like me that's constantly wants to strive forward and just better myself, even in personal life, and things like electrolyte tablets on the wedding days and all these little things, they don't have to be camera specific. I think that is a great way to start.
I love that. I think that's I think you've given some solid advice there. I think what I would say is just get the bare bones. Start off super simple. Just get the bare bones set in place. You don't have to run in and, you don't have to have 4 cameras and all the lenses and all the kit. And like we've said, all these things will come in time. Like you don't have to jump the gun and run into it as though, you've been shooting for 10 years and, you've got all this knowledge, because you haven't. So I think it's essential at first just to get into it and just give it a go, get in and get a feel and get the shooting down, I would say, first, and then go from there. So, reflecting on your career then, Jake, reflecting on it so far, what's been the highs, what's been the lows? Can you talk us through some moments maybe that have been like, that really stand out as being like, oh, yes, get in, and there's some moments where you're like, get out.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yeah, get in, get out, crikey.
It's really come to a new level of low this episode. I don't know what's happened. Highs and lows.
Highs and lows.
Get in, get out.
Highs. We briefly touched on this, but just that flexibility with family life. And I know that it's obviously seasonal and it's super condensed into the sort of summer months. But that being said, I couldn't wish for a better kind of work-life balance on a general split. It's really lovely, and obviously, as I mentioned, we've got a little boy now, so just being able to have more family time at home, do things on the weekdays with my wife, who's also self-employed. We're fortunate enough to like have that lifestyle, which is something I wouldn't swap for anything or any amount of money, to be fair. It's amazing, and obviously, like, it's at the end of the day, it can be a successful career. And I think this is something that isn't talked about maybe enough. People shy away from it, but it's a good job to have. And I think this is like maybe a misconception. When at least I first started out, people would say, "Oh, it's not a real job. What do you do for your actual full-time job?" And I think that maybe through social media and maybe personalities, behind brands putting themselves out there and that showing like a glimpse behind sort of a peek behind the curtains has kind of illustrated to people that you can make like a decent living from this. And it is quite accessible to get into. The financial aspect and the flexibility just are obviously the highs that stand out to me. I know we briefly spoke about the sort of like job fulfillment and satisfaction, which I think obviously is the king in this case, and that's kind of how I got into it in the very first place. Negatives, I know we spoke about this, but ironically it is also the social life in the summer and mainly working weekends. Obviously I have the flexibility in the weekdays and can kind of thankfully move editing to suit like a day off in the week if I need to, if I'm working at the weekends. I think finding a better balance would be something, or is something that I'm constantly trying to find. And I think through commercial work, that might be a good avenue for any wedding videographer, to be fair, to get into, to split the load over the winter months and the quieter months, and also just maybe you could free up a few weekends, perhaps.
I think it's important to mention that in terms of just going back to what you said about, the work-life balance, it's a topic that's discussed, I think, like you see it all the time. To do with like wedding photographers and wedding videographers chatting online about it, and it's talked about quite a lot. I feel like people do talk about it, but nothing's ever really done about it.
No.
And I think the problem with it is when you work for yourself, no matter what industry you're in, I think it's always going to be difficult because you're never ever going to be fully satisfied.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to do it where I really strip back the hours in the weeks, and sort of don't push myself and just work. Have this mentality of like, I guess like more of a hippie mentality. I was trying this last year as well, where I work when like I feel like I'm really in a creative space, but that can be sort of like, I found for me that we're like really late at night, and like that really just clashes with like my sort of like personal life. Like it's not great to be working at like 8 p.m. until like 1 a.m. for example. Like that's where I found I was like ultra creative. And then sometimes I've tried experimenting, treating it, which is what I'm doing at the minute, where you kind of have to sort of approach it from like, the reason I got into doing weddings was because I hated, one of the reasons, this is not the pure reason, one of the reasons was that I hated the concept of a 9 to 5. I grew up in like a very working class household where my parents hated what they did, and I just didn't want to replicate that in my life. I didn't want to have a 9 to 5 because every day they'd come back and be moaning about it. So growing up, I had this like thing in my head of like, I don't want to do this, and now I'm doing that. I can't, like when I'm editing, I'm sort of waking up, I'm going to the gym, coming back, and then I'm sat down at the desk and I'm treating it like a 9 to 5. And for me at the minute, it's just one of those things that I'm like, I hate doing this. But having said that, it's one of those things you just got to
just fine tune.
It's a process.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this because I'm wanting people that are sort of in the early days, or other people out there will be feeling the same as this for definite, because it's just one of those things, and it's hard, and it's hard at times being your own boss. I think you'd probably agree to that, because you've got to be really sort of disciplined, I guess, in terms of like allowing yourself time off. Like because it's easy if you're at home in your office, you think, so a bit of time off. How do you find that? Because do you edit from home and stuff?
I do, yeah. And it's something I've never really had a problem with, even going back to university days, just revising in my room, for example. And a lot of my housemates...
can't get enough for it. Lock him in his room and loves it.
I know. Absolute bookworm.
Bookworm, what a nerd.
Yeah. But yeah, like I had a couple of housemates that could not concentrate outside of a library. I've never been one of those people. I can quite easily concentrate in my own environment. It's got a little bit tricky with a little one now, sort of crawling around the house. And that's it means that I can then pop down for a cup of tea and have a quick tea break with him, which I love. But yeah, I think as he grows up, I might have to set more strict times in terms of making sure I'm doing my work when he might be out, or during naps and things like that, and then be more present in the day. So just shifting my time. But at the moment, it's working quite well. But I think actually, coming back, like you just said, being your own boss, it can be quite lonely. So obviously me coming out of a full-time job, I was with a team of people, and I'm quite a social person. And so although my wife's at home, during the early stages of me going full-time, she wasn't. So it was kind of a little bit lonely. And going back to working with other people, WhatsApp groups, having friends in the industry, it's actually a big help in terms of just being there to... I know you could have any friends that are available, but having people in the industry that are just going to get the highs and lows.
Yeah, they're on the same sort of like time frame as you, I guess.
Exactly.
Like, what are some of the aspects of your business that you're currently looking to improve and work upon?
I think, at least in this off season, I need to improve my social media game. So ironically, with my commercial work is actually something, so I work with a couple of influencers and I produce very regular social media content for them, for all the different platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. And I do sort of 3 or 4 days a month for them, and it's like they've got enough stuff to post each day. So I've got no excuse because I know the recipes for things. It's just where that slots into my editing process. And I think that's the thing that I want to improve is to find a workflow, because I'm in theory, I'd obviously edit a film and send it to my couple, and then I'd go back to spend time on my own things for marketing purposes. In reality, that never works, because you're then on to the next edit before you can even think about it. So I think trying to find somewhere that slots in so that I have a bank of stuff to start posting on social, I think that's something that I'm going to try and improve on. I think it's always something I've had a love-hate relationship with anyway. But yeah, I think it's no excuse, to be fair, anymore, and I need to do it. So ask me in 2 months.
Well, that leads me on nicely to asking you about sort of in 5 years' time. Then, where do you see Jake Burgess Films? Where do you see it? What has it changed much? I know it's hard to think about.
Yeah.
I don't mean this question from like an industry and like the cameras and stuff like that. I guess it's more like where are you hoping to take the business, I guess?
I think, to be fair, what I've been doing the last 2 seasons, I think I'm quite happy with the way that things are going. Numbers of weddings is coming down to a more manageable number. So I'm 25 sort of is the number that I'm sort of hoping and aiming to shoot at the moment. Like you, I used to do a lot. It was like 50, like just touching 50 off the back of COVID. I know I'm not that sort of person. So 2025 would be amazing.
Yeah, sweet spot.
And just like a good balance, like a handful of destination ones. I did quite a few this year, but with a little one, he came abroad on I think 3 of them with the wife as well. It wasn't just him. It was on a tripod bag. And so being away from home is not what it was like before I had a kid. And also my split from like weddings to commercial work is quite a nice balance. It's like 70 to 30%, I'd say. And so maybe that would go 60-40 might be a good one to kind of offset that sort of like summer rush of weddings. But generally, I'm quite happy with where it's going, which, to be fair, if you asked me that a few years ago, I probably would have been like, oh no, I want to do this, do that. I think I've got the young family now. Things change every year anyway, but as it
different
stands,
priorities.
I'm quite happy with the trajectory, and I'm just really enjoying it.
That's
at
great
the
to hear,
moment.
mate.
So
Love that. Yeah, that's really
what
good.
about you?
What about me?
Yeah, 5 years time.
5 years time. Oh, it's spun it round on me. I don't think I've been actually asked and answered a question on the podcast, so I normally deny it and normally shut it down.
Yeah.
Get down there.
Yeah.
This is my podcast. But I might answer this, actually. That's quite interesting. I need to think about it because I haven't actually thought about this at all.
That's fine, mate.
But I think I guess for me, I want to, it's okay, being really honest here and really transparent, I want to move more into like the educational space.
Yep.
I think I've made that pretty obvious with the announcing the shop and announcing the podcast. I think it's always been a passion of mine to be sort of on the other side of the camera. I think I've suppressed that for a lot of years. I was chatting to you when we were out shooting in Mallorca about my YouTube past. This is not something I've spoken about actually much at all. I mentioned it once on a story, I think, last year. But yeah, back in the day, I was sort of like a budding, wanting to be sort of a YouTuber. So that's like the career that I wanted to have. And then that failed miserably. So that went down like a lead balloon. So I thought, you know what I'll do? The opportunity to film weddings came about, and then I just, for years, just prioritised that and built this business, and I'm loving it. But I've had the sort of urge recently of wanting to be back in front of the camera, wanting to be more in the educational space, and I do feel like, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I do feel like that the industry is promoting videographers and suppliers, in general, photographers, videographers mainly, from what I've seen. It's promoting more of that's like whether it's a right or wrong thing, and this is like quote unquote cool thing to do, like a trendy thing to do, to be like, you're not just a videographer, you're also a bit of an online personality, I guess. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that is what I am now or what I want to become, but that's just like, when you go on your sort of your feeds, it's kind of promoting a lot of this in front of camera, TikTok-y type stuff. And I'm not a TikToker, don't want to touch that. But basically, I'm just wanting to see where this goes, and hopefully it goes on a path of like, who knows where it's going to lead to. I've not got a dead set plan for it. It's just an interesting avenue. And I want to be back in front of the camera, mate, to be honest.
Mate,
because I enjoy it.
You're great in front of the camera as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And not just the looks. It's
not the looks, Stick to the podcast. Turn off the video.
Stick to radio, mate.
Stick to radio, Got a face for radio is what they said, don't they? There is actually a question that I want to ask you.
Blindside me, go on.
No, it's not bad. No. So I realised that I've not spoken or asked you about your destination weddings.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah, we can do.
So this is part of the podcast, mate. You're still in it. You're still in the game. You do quite a lot of them.
I mean, it's something that I've always done a handful each year, and I'm not sure why, but this year I've done, I think, 7, which for me, I used to do sort of 2 or 3 a year. This year was just a lot more, and I've got a few more booked in for next year, and I have loved them, and I do love them.
There's a book coming here. I can sense a book coming.
No. It's not a but, and I've briefly mentioned it. It is a but. It's the being away from family, I think, is the one thing that I would like to limit the numbers for destination weddings. It's obviously all well and good to do 6 or 7 a year, but as you know, that's, I mean, most destination weddings I do are kind of multiple days. I did one in September that was, I think, 4 or 5 days shooting. It was a lot, and so that's a good week away from home.
Yeah.
And so this is just something to factor in. So I love travel, and that's kind of going back to how I got into the video game.
Yeah.
I love it. So combining those two is just like I can't get enough of it, and I think it's just, I love the culture. I love I just feel like destination weddings, at least for UK couples or American couples coming over to Europe, it's a lot more personable as well. I feel like they have maybe a smaller wedding party and they open up to their suppliers a bit more over the few days, which I love, and that's hopefully what I can sort of put across in my films a little bit more. But yeah, so I do a few. They tend to be more Europe based, and it's something that I will always continue to do, but maybe not as many as I've done this year, because it was a bit relentless back and forth.
It gets intense, especially when you're away. It's very.
It chops away at editing time. You have a backlog, but they are fantastic. But they're not as glamorous, and I'm sure everyone says this, as people might think. But they're still really good, and I love them, and they will always have a place in my kind of the wedding plan of the year.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm. So including second shooting gigs, because that's a second shot with you earlier this year. Yeah. That was actually fairly recently. We're early this year. It was very recent.
End of August, but I mean, it feels like a long time ago.
It does feel like a long time ago. But I shot 10. So for me, that was like, whoa, that's quite a lot. And now, like, I enjoyed it. I love it. But I just couldn't do that again, I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where you've got to, like, cross the bridge when it gets to it and, like, kind of assess it and work out if you can. But for me, I think, I'm more sort of in the 5 region. I think
that's a good number, 4 or 5. That's what I was thinking as well. So I think when you're away for 4 days, 3 nights, whatever it might be, it's difficult, because yes, you charge for travel, and then any additional day shooting you're doing. But then when you get a wedding that's closer to home, you can be in your bed, either side of it. It's probably more profitable, because if you're anything like me, I'm spending at least €30 a day on gelato in Tuscany. And so, it's difficult. And from a business point of view, it's probably more profitable to do the UK ones and have the space either side to get on top of your editing and maybe take on the odd commercial gig. It's a double-edged sword, really. Because you did that amazing wedding in Thailand, didn't you? I think that's how I first stumbled across your work.
You did actually. I remember.
What year was that?
That when I shot that wedding.
Yeah.
So that was 2021. I'm gonna guess.
Okay, so it wasn't as long ago as I thought, but so that's where I met my now wife. I'd love to shoot a wedding.
Just think you could have met me.
We could
have been skipping down the road, mate. Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I appreciate everything you've shared. So where can people find you?
Thanks for having me, mate. I am Jake Burgess Films across all sort of platforms. Jake Burgess, like burgers without the R. Jake Burgess Films, jakeburgessfilms.co.uk. That's that, and thanks for having me, mate.
No worries, thanks a lot for coming on, mate. Cheers.